brings us on to item 4, public question time. We have no general questions this evening. We now come on to item 5, planning applications. For anyone watching this meeting, I'd just like to inform everyone that we have one withdrawn application on the agenda. That is application 5D, application number 21015274, Cardinal Works, rear of 46 Bradford Street, Braintree. That application has been withdrawn by the applicant and will not be discussed this evening. We now come on to there's no Part B applications this evening either. So we go straight on to the Part A applications. We have no speakers this evening on any of the applications. So we go straight to the presentation. And the first application we'll be discussing is application number 190. Let there be light. Thank you. I'll repeat that. Application 1900729 REM, land rear of Green Gables, London Road, Black Notley, and this application can be found on pages 6 to 18 and is going to be presented by Lisa. Good evening and thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Evening, members. This is an application of reserve matters following an outline approval under reference 18/00082/out for the erection of 5 dwellings. The location is land to the rear of Green Gables, which is 215 London Road, Black Notley. Here's a location site. The site is located to the east of Black Notley. It consists of 3 separate parcels in effect, which is this frontage parcel which has the existing dwelling house on and its residential curtilage, this rear parcel of land that is a landscaped area, and this right-of-way to that rear access, although the right-of-way here doesn't, no development is proposed within that area. As noted within the report and given the nature of the reserve matters application, there is an outline permission granted for the erection of 5 dwellings, and that was approved with all matters reserved. So turning to the site plan here, the existing 2-storey dwelling of 215 is to be demolished to allow this new access through the site to London Road, from London Road. The access extends the depth of the site, the depth of the entire frontage plot. Existing hedgerow here along either side will be retained, and proposed strengthening of hedgerow is proposed on either side. Tree planting is also proposed either side of the access track. You can then see that the access tapers through to this rear parcel of land. So again, looking at that rear parcel of land in a bit more detail, this is where the 5 dwellings will be proposed. Plots 1 and 2 here, these are 2-bed linked detached dwellings. Plots 3 and 4 are 3 beds with a first floor study. These are semi-detached dwellings, as we can see. And plot 5 here is a 4-bed dwelling with a study and a separate garage. In terms of parking, plots 1 and 2 will benefit from this undercroft and driveway parking, and they also have 1 space within this garage and the driveway here. Plot 3 has 2 spaces within this triple garage and a driveway space. Plot 4 has a single garage and their driveway, and then plot 5 here benefits from the double garage and driveway provision. Officers have sought to negotiate a number of amendments to the application as it's been with us some time, and we're now content that it would provide a high quality layout that would be sympathetic to the locality. Also had careful regarding to neighbours amenity. Plots 1 and 2, which are those closest to neighbours, the distance here to the boundary would be 11.5 metres, and from plot 2, 12.5. And there's no first floor windows within plot 1 here. Here is the tree survey plan. This remains the same as approved on the outline consent, so the number of trees and tree works does not differ. The only change here is in regards to T5 here, which is a Lombardy poplar, which is around 22 metres in height. Now we can see here that this tree would not be affected by the siting of these dwellings or any of the neighbouring properties, and it wouldn't be within falling distance of those either. Officers are keen to secure its retention and have negotiated with the agents that this will now be secured. So an updated tree survey tree protection plan has been submitted to include this retention. Now officers feel that this is a positive aspect of the development. As you'll see in some of the photographs later, it's quite a prominent tree within the locality, and it does have visual amenity for the area. Because of this retention, we are now seeking a further condition be imposed, and I'll show you the wording of that shortly, and that's to require that the development is carried out in accordance with this plan, and then to secure details of the access construction here and the driveway construction, just to ensure the retention of this tree. A further condition is imposed, and again you'll see the wording of that shortly, in regard to a management plan also to cover management responsibilities and maintenance schedules for this access road and general all landscaped areas within the site. So turning to some elevations, plot 1 and 2 here, so these are your 2-bed units. You can see there's just the link detached, 2 bedrooms at first floor, sorry. In terms of elevations, they're 2 stories, brick plinth, render with a slate roof and brick chimney. Plot 3 and 4, again very similar in, plot 3 and 4 are 3-bed with this first floor study, and again very similar in terms of elevation and the materials. Plot 4 would benefit from the single garage, so this would be red brick with a slate roof. And plot 5, the detached unit, 4-bed with a study. Again, similar materials in terms of brick and render. The double garage here, which is the garage associated with the plot 5, again the double garage, brick and slate materials. And then similar for the triple garage that serves plot 3, and then providing some parking for these units. So just looking at some photos now. This is a view of the site from London Road. So here's the 2-storey dwelling that will be demolished to make way for the access. Here is that 22-metre high poplar Lombardy that we're seeking now to retain. You can see its prominence within the street scene as existing, but also if that dwelling was to be removed and opened up to provide the access, it's obviously a very prominent tree there, and we're keen to secure it. Photo now from within the site, and this is just looking back to the rear of the property, so your access would be coming fairly central within this plot. This existing hedgerow would be strengthened. Here is a view from sort of standing where the access tapers into this rear plot, looking towards the northern boundary, and another view here of the northern boundary as well. This is one of the views looking towards the eastern boundary, towards the paddock field beyond. And again, you can see it a bit clearer in this photo with that post and rail fencing and the agricultural land beyond. This is a view towards the southern boundary. It just gives you a bit of a view of the extent of existing landscaping that is to be retained. This is the view of the western boundary, so this is the view from within the site looking towards the back of those houses that front onto London Road. And another view of that western boundary, so the access would be coming through here, and this is the existing poplar that we're seeking, well, it will now be retained as part of this application. Now in terms of those conditions I mentioned, this is the wording that officers are recommending being imposed. And so the first one covers that the development would just be carried out in accordance with that plan that retains that additional tree T5, and also secures the details for ground protection for the construction of the access and driveway. And then the second condition here on this slide relates to that management plan to cover off the management responsibilities and maintenance schedules for the access road and those landscaped areas across the site. Now, officers are also recommending to members that we add an additional condition here in regards to the construction for the access road, just to require it be able to capable of carrying a 26-ton vehicle for refuse purposes. And because of the altered tree plan, we're also requesting that that plan is revised to revision H. Now, in terms of the summary and conclusion, the principle of development on the site for 5 dwellings has already been established by the Outline Planning Commission. The development will provide a mix of dwelling sizes. The appearance, layout, scale and detailed design is considered acceptable. The development will provide acceptable amenity for future occupiers with no adverse impact to neighbours' amenity. The access and parking provision is considered acceptable, and the development will retain more trees than approved within the outline permission. And therefore, Officer recommendation to you this evening is that reserved matters are approved, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It was a very comprehensive presentation. Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Veterans of this committee will know that I'm generally personally underwhelmed by the sort of infill backland developments that we've allowed on both sides of London Road, but they do provide ample precedent for this sort of small development. I don't share the parish council's reservations about the mix and style of the dwellings. I don't think it's unbalanced, or that the layout gives a cramped appearance. I note that PD has been removed, so a check can be kept on or preventing that happening perhaps in the future. And I think design, appearance, materials, they're all in keeping with the standards, and the report says that room space standards, garden standards, parking standards all appear acceptable. Has outline permission, reserved matters, therefore move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Does it find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very little, really, only to agree with Councillor Mann's comments. I quite like the designs. I do think there's plenty of room on the site for this. Pleased that the tree is being kept. That's a positive. Other than that, no, I think it's perfectly acceptable, so I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I do like the design. I noticed actually, looking back at some of the previous documents, because this application has been around a long time, and I do think the design is significantly better than what was originally proposed. So I think one of the difficulties of this site actually is because it's backland development, it's difficult to ensure that there's sufficient protection for privacy for existing residents on London Road, and also within the houses, for the houses, the future occupants of these houses themselves. But I think that's been achieved by the layout. The only question I had really was the strip of land that goes behind some of the other houses, and between the farm and the houses. Is that going to be accessible to anybody who should wander down the road? Would that pose any kind of sort of security risk to the residents in those houses? I'm not sure this is a point that's been raised by any of the objectors, but I just wanted to ask you about that. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the access does come from that backland development, sort of down, sort of past the rear of a few of the dwellings, and then it extends onto a public right-of-way. So potentially there could be people that would wander off up there. It is very rural and it is gated at the end, so you would know that you're on private land. Really, you wouldn't easily wander off, I don't think, unless you were climbing the gate or the gate was open. So I don't really see that as too much of an issue, and I don't think it has been raised by third parties.
Does anyone else wish to add anything new or further? No. But it has been moved and seconded that we approve this application. That is with the 3 additional conditions and the information about the access road strength. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. We now come to the next application, which is 5B, application number 2014514, Rascas Sheepcotes Lane, Silver End. This application is going to be presented by Andrew. Andrew, good evening and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. So this item relates to new development at Rascase in Sheepcotes Lane, Silver End. The description of the development is erection of a single-storey block to provide 8 times 1 bedroom residential supported living units under use class C3, a staff breakout unit under use class C2, and a single-storey detached building providing a training room also under use class C2, with associated car parking, landscaping and sewage treatment plant. This is the site location plan with the site outlined in red at the bottom of the screen there. It's rather confusing actually because of the north is at the bottom of the screen, as you can see from the logo that's been put on there, but it's being presented sort of upside down, as it were. But you can see that the site is relatively close proximity to the edge of the village envelope of Silver End, which is somewhere around this sort of area, so a short walk down Sheepcotes Lane. To the north of the site, or towards the bottom of the screen, you've got agricultural open fields beyond. On the opposite side of Sheepcotes Lane, it's relatively open, rural character. You've obviously got some residential properties to the south of the site. You've got Wayne, which is a neighbouring residential property, and beyond that you've got Miraboo, which is another facility operated by the same care home provider as the site of Rascase. And to the southeast of the site, on this side, you've got what is currently an open field, but actually benefits from extant plan permission for up to 350 dwellings, and part of that site's been built out at the front, and the other parcel will be built out in due course. Referring to site photos now, this is a photo taken from the front of Rascase. You can see this is the entry gate, and there is an exit gate at the other end. The site operates an in and out exit arrangement. The main building you can see there is part of the care home, and this smaller scale building is an annex which also provides habitable rooms for care. This is the rear of the boundary to the existing care home, so it's delineated at present with a timber board fence. And this is a view looking to the southeast beyond that fence, so you can see there's some mature trees to the southeast of the site. They actually lie outside of the development site boundary, but are in close proximity. And along the southern boundary, you can just see, get a feel for the level of vegetation that's currently present there. And that continues as you go along. This is still looking on the south boundary, but as you kind of go further towards the existing neighbouring property, the vegetative screen increases with some taller, what look like leylandii trees there. And that is looking back towards a neighbouring property at Wayne from the new development site, the front edge of that. And this is just looking directly to the rear of the care home, so you can see that this is the grass amenity area with some play equipment that serves the existing care home. And in this area here, behind this boarded fence, you can see where staff parking is currently provided. This is on the northern boundary. You can see the vegetative screening's a little less dense. It's a bit more dispersed, as it were, with some vegetation, but relatively open on that boundary at present. And this is a photo taken from Sheepcotes Lane from a northern vantage, looking back towards the site, so you can see the existing care home and the rest of the northern boundary of the site. You can see where it sort of opens up towards the rear. So looking at the existing site layout, it's quite similar to the original plan, but perhaps just a bit closer up and showing some more of that detail. Hopefully that will kind of make sense having seen the photos, but this is the area of amenity space, staff car parking, and then you've got the existing care home buildings, and this area here indicates the sewage treatment plant that serves the existing care home. And it's this parcel of land to the rear of the existing care home that is really the consideration under this application. So looking at the proposed layout as originally submitted, you can see and get a feel instantly for the nature of the development proposed in terms of its form. It's a U-shaped single-storey building accommodating the supported living units and a staff breakout unit. And then you've got a further detached building that's also single-storey, providing the training facility with car parking and cycle store all delineated there. The application was subsequently amended at the request of officers and following consultation with Essex Fire and Rescue. It came to light that the access arrangement originally shown wasn't wide enough for a fire tender to reach the rear of the site within the 45-metre carry distance for a hose. So a new access route is being proposed that would go across the existing amenity space, bypassing the constricted narrow point here that a fire tender won't be able to navigate, so that they can then reach the site with an appropriate turn head as well to allow them to exit when she's been attended to. Hopefully it shouldn't happen, but just in case. And just for sort of clarity, that access would actually be constructed using grasscrete or a similar product, so it wouldn't have a hard standing appearance. It looks relatively abrupt on this plan, but it would actually sort of assimilate into the open space quite nicely, officers feel. And the applicant has also shown some additional areas of additional landscape planting around the edge of the site. So turn to the floor plans. The level of internal amenity proposed for the supported living units is very good, compliant with nationally described space standards, and also external amenity in accordance with the Essex Design Guide standards. And that goes for the staff breakout unit as well, which is sort of intended to provide an area for staff on shift, providing care perhaps on night, to have a bit of rest and respite away when care is not required. The main difference between this type of accommodation and what's already being provided on the site of the existing care home is essentially this accommodation would be for adults with difficult disabilities and learning difficulties who want to have that independence but still need an element of care. But to all intents and purposes, the habitat accommodation provided would form and function of a dwelling, so it wouldn't be ordinary market housing, but it would allow them to live independently with support, whereas a conventional C2 use tends to require more care provision and also tends to incorporate shared facilities. And the staff training room is essentially going to serve both the staff for the new development, but it would also operate in association with the existing care home on the site, so it would sort of serve a dual purpose. Looking at the elevations, you can see that officers felt these were actually quite sympathetic and appropriate to a rural edge location. The materials are weatherboarding and plain tiles, but a condition is recommended to secure samples. But it's an appearance and scale that's commensurate to almost a barn typology, not something that would look particularly out of place in a rural area, which is one of the reasons why it's set out in the report that actually, when having regard to the scale of this scheme, it's not considered it would be so harmful when taking into account its context and also the development to the rear of the site that will sort of define the landscape in future as well. And these are just more of the elevations. You can see that the staff training room is a bit more of a contemporary appearance and tries to break up the material so that it doesn't look quite so monotonous with the supported living units. And the applicant also, at request officers, provided some details in relation to the bin and cycle stores, given they would be on the northern edge of the site, to sort of illustrate how they might transpire, and conditions attached that the cycle and waste storage would be provided in accordance with these details, as it seems to be a high standard of design with black weatherboarding and the brickwork. Looking at trees, there would be a requirement for removal of 5 fruit trees and 6 blackthorn scrub as part of the proposed development, and you can see the trees to be removed, or the shrubs in these locations. The large mature trees off-site, as referred to at the beginning, would be protected, and tree protection measures are proposed as part of the scheme. And there is a walnut tree there that would have the new access driveway encroaching into its root protection area, but as part of the tree protection plan, it's also provided to have a no-dig zone there. The landscape officer reviewed the details submitted with the application, had no objections to loss of amenity grounds, subject to compliance with the tree protection measures outlined. And the detailed landscaping scheme is secured by condition, including additional informative for the irrigation of that to secure its long term. And then just an update, hopefully members have received earlier, the Essex Police consultation. This wasn't included in the report as an oversight when drafting, but this has been circulated ahead of the meeting for completeness. The general gist of the response seems to be there was no objection, but there would be welcome opportunity to engage with the applicant on secure by design measures. So turning to the conclusion, the application site is located outside of, but in close proximity to the village envelope for Silver End. The proposed development seeks to expand the existing specialist housing on the site by delivering 8 supported living units, a staff breakout unit and additional staff training facilities. A new waste treatment plant and soakaway will be provided to accommodate for additional foul drainage. It's acknowledged that the development would not represent a minor extension of the existing specialist housing facility on the site, and the site is relatively accessible when taking into account its rural context and close proximity to Silver End and the services, facilities and public transport opportunities available within it. And a substantial benefit would arise from the delivery of 8 much needed supporting living units. There are no objections from statutory consultees. Having regard to identified benefits and harms, it is concluded that the benefits would outweigh the harms in the planning balance. Therefore, officers recommend planning permission be granted, subject to commissions. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, is it possible to show us where the sewage treatment plant will be? Because there's been a lot of comments about sewage and foul water, and I didn't see on the site plan where it was.
Absolutely. So I think if I can just go up to the proposed site plan. So this area here would be, this area that's got the big sort of square lines going through it would serve as the soakaway would be accommodated in that area. We don't know the precise location of the sewage treatment plant, but it would be in close proximity to the soakaway, enable that soakaway to serve it aptly. The sewage treatment plant would be subterranean, so it wouldn't be visible above ground level.
No, I was rather concerned it would be near the turning point. That was all. If it's going to soakaways there, that was all I was concerned. Thank you. Thank you.
That's great.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So this site and others in Sheepcoats Lane have been subject to a long planning history for this type of accommodation. And this represents a very significant intensification of that use in the countryside. I agree with officers that it's a planning balance decision, but I'm going to propose refusal in a few minutes because I think they tip the balance the wrong side. And there's a couple of points in particular why I think that's the case, which they have not given sufficient weight to. Just going through the main points I've got in no particular order. On ecology, it's good to see the retention of some of the trees, but I will say yet again, the tree report says that those coming out are poor quality. They always do. On lighting, there's a very well-written condition. I accept the condition is very good, and it says that the lights have to be designed to not harm ecology, but the existing lights in the existing site are horrendous. As you approach Silver End from Sheepcoats Lane, from the sharp bend near the farm, at any time of night you are presented with this array of white lights which are on all night. So clearly no consideration has been given for that at the moment. In terms of intensification, I think this is a really important issue. So no one's saying we don't need these type of facilities. We certainly do. But this is actually the 4th, and in effect 5th, because there's going to be 2 units on this site, of this type of accommodation in this area. There's these 2. There's Miraboo, the other side of the Wain. There's another one, which isn't a formal one, but it's a shared house for people with learning disabilities in the same lane. And there's a 5th one along Borsty Road where it becomes Lanham Green on the border of Silver End and Cressing, probably about a mile or so away. So there's a lot of these facilities in this area. The Sheepcoats Lane is a very narrow country lane with passing places, and it's designated in the local highways panel to become a quiet lane. So it's interesting that highways don't appear to have paid much attention to that, because one of the things will happen is, if it's granted tonight, is you'll have a doubling of staff numbers accessing the site. There will be more traffic, essentially. There's no doubt about that. And that brings me on to the point where I think officers have not assessed this application correctly. On page 43, they say that it's fairly close to the village envelope, which is true, although not immediately next to it. And they say that, therefore, that means that the site is relatively close to services. But normally, in these types of presentations and reports, we have an analysis of how close the services are. There's no such analysis in this report that I can see. So very roughly, walking distance, the people living in these units would be about 700 metres from the village centre where the shops are. Now, that's quite a significant walk, and I think that should have been factored into it. It almost flows that the narrative is, well, because it's near the village envelope, it's therefore near the services. No, it's not. The services on Broadway and Silver End are much further away. Then we come to the Wain, which is the private residential house, which is sandwiched between this site and Miraboo. Now, I think officers didn't even touch on that just now, really. The residents there for many, many years have raised issues. Now, again, this is not a complaint about the people who live in these types of facilities, but they have experienced a lot of issues with noise, materials in their gardens, people getting out, etc., etc. That's not to say they will on this particular site, but the assumption is that because there's a landscaping boundary, there won't be any issues. Actually, the garden of the Wain runs entirely down the side of where these units are proposed to be made. So as far as they are concerned, they've got more development coming adjacent to their property. In terms of sewage, not a pleasant subject, Madam Chairman, but you've mentioned it, so I will as well. Yes, there has been a long-running history, and I, as a ward member, have often been copied in by residents' complaints, and that is an issue which appears to be being dealt with. So they've got an on-site modern treatment plant, I believe, which will serve both the in-effect units, going to a drainage field instead of going into the ditches, which is what it used to do, and it did used to stink. I mean, there's no question about that. However, that in itself raises an issue. That drainage field is part of the current, what could potentially be amenity land, and the new access is going to go through the amenity land. Therefore, the current dedicated amenity land is being reduced and is trying to serve various different functions, which I think is an issue, again, not properly covered in the report. So, in conclusion, I think that this is actually the wrong side of the balance. As officers have set out several places in this report, it's clearly contrary to policy in that it's in the countryside and it's not a minor extension. It's effectively a completely new set of units of these developments. They say that, well, that can be rebalanced by the fact it's close to amenities. I think I've demonstrated it's not. It's at least 700 metres away from those amenities. And, by the way, that involves crossing the main road through the village, where there is no pedestrian crossing. And there are these other issues of the sheer density of this type of use. Again, not disparaging that type of use. They're needed facilities, but there are a lot of them in this one area. So for the reasons I've set out, and because officers have already said it's against those specific planning policies, I'd like to remove refusal quoting those policies. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Does that find a seconder before I move on? Thank you, Councillor Thorogood. Do you wish to speak at this time? Thank you. Members, I'll open it up. We don't take the vote yet, do we? Councillor's not listening to me. We can further discuss before we go to the vote. So, Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do think this is quite a difficult one. I find myself actually in quite a lot of agreement with what Councillor Abbott has said. This type of unit supported living is undoubtedly needed, and this, for me, it's nothing to do with who is going to be living there at all. But he's right, there is a considerable sort of concentration of these units in a very small area. I've been on planning committee one way or another for a long time, so I can remember the previous applications for Mirabeau and the gradual expansion of the units on this site as well. And it's just intensifying it. Yes, it is going out into the countryside. I mean, I appreciate that balanced against that, we've got a very big development coming up very close to it of, 300 homes? 350, thank you, Andrew, 350 homes. So, you know, it's not going to look that isolated, but I don't think that's the point, because we've got to look at this application on its own. I am slightly uncomfortable about the expansion of buildings, and I say nothing to do with who's going to be in them, of buildings on this site, and on what is a very narrow road. I've been down there a few times over the years when we've had applications, and it is a lane. Having said that, I'm not sure how strong our grounds are, on what grounds for refusing it. So, yeah, it's a really on-balance one for me. I am struggling with it a bit, I have to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mann.
A question for Officers Chair. The sort of 700 metres distance referred to, what's that in walking time? And is that in the limits that we normally think are acceptable?
Andrew, can you answer?
I think I'll probably refer that to Neil. I think Neil has probably got something
Neil,
to say
sorry,
on that.
Yeah, that's all right. So, yeah, I think depends how far you walk. I think I was just having a look at the Western Road application after Councillor Abbott was sort of raised the point about walking distances, because I'd be very mindful of the fact that there we had an appeal decision where an inspector considered the site to be a sustainable location within reasonable walking and cycling distance of village facilities, and obviously here with Rascas, immediately to the back are going to be some of these residential properties that are being built by Red Row or will be built by Red Row in the future. So I think we'd have to be quite careful if we was saying we feel Rascas is unacceptable, given that an inspector found the Western Road development by Red Row to be within a reasonable walking distance of facilities. I think ideally you would usually look for a shorter distance. In answer to Councillor Mann's question, sort of 400 metres is sort of a more desirable distance. There's different sort of tables and different guidelines. I think 800 metres is regarded to be sort of the upper end of what's acceptable. So I think if you're over 800 metres, I think there's guidance which would suggest that's more than a reasonable walking distance. I think if it's 700 metres, it's probably at the upper end, so it's not particularly convenient and not a strong point. But I think it would be difficult, perhaps, for us to argue, or the council to argue, that it was unacceptable. Like I say, particularly mindful of the Red Row development behind, if that helps on that point.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Abbott, I'll let you come back.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to flag that obviously we're aware of that very painful inspector's decision, but that was granted with a whole series of crossing points, new bespoke footways. It's just been finished, street lit along Western Road. This isn't. This is straight out onto a lane with no footway and no street lights, and that's a difference.
I think that's, if members were looking to refuse, I think that's probably what I would suggest you concentrate more on rather than the distance. Because I think if listening to the point you was making earlier, Councillor Abbott, just focusing on the distance, I think that's a point we might struggle to sustain. But I think if you're talking about the connectivity and the attractiveness and the safety of the walking route, that's a slightly different matter. So I think it's just how we, if that's what members think, that's something to consider in terms of how we couch the reason for refusal.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I can see that there is a balance issue here, and it's been summarised in the report as well as by Andrew. I just like to just get his view really on the relative weight of. I suppose this is our decision really, but there clearly is a conflict with the local plan, the adopted plan, and the new local plan. But on the other hand, there is this desire to provide additional specialist housing, which in your report you say should be given substantial weight. Can you give us any guidance on the relative weight, or is that really just something that we have to?
I think my sort of, hopefully some of the weight that I've set out is within the report, but I think in terms of my rationale perhaps for sort of setting out the differences in weights and why I perhaps gave it substantial in the balance is because of this type of specialist housing is in demand, and I think at the end of the plan statement submitted by the agent there's a letter from Essex County Council setting out how high in demand these facilities are. We have a policy in the adopted local plan which is not really, as I've set out in my report, completely up to speed with this type of specialist housing. It's just more in relation to institutional uses. Then we've got the draft plan, but I'm not aware precisely of how many allocations there are as part of that. I don't believe there are many. So we are going to be reliant to a degree on windfall sites for meeting that shortfall, and given the sort of demand for this type of accommodation and some of the support that's been submitted by the County Council, I can see that there is a real demand and need for this type of development, which is why it was sort of given the substantial weight in the balance, whereas some of the other conflicts officers were sort of gave less weight to in terms of development boundaries, because it is a countryside use and there is a policy in principle in the draft local plan for residential institutions in the countryside, so there was that to consider as well. But that was sort of some of the reasoning behind some of the points that I've sort of set out in the report, but hopefully that's of some use. And I was just going to clarify one other thing as well. In terms of the soakaway area proposed, that neither forms part of the existing amenity for the existing care home, nor part of the amenity for the new care home. The new supported living units, the supported living units would have their own private gardens. They would have a central courtyard framed by the building, but that would be for shared purposes. But the actual soakaway area would only really serve as a soakaway, and it would have a grasscrete turning head, but it wouldn't remove from the existing amenity of the current care home either. I just thought I'd pick that up as well.
Councillor Hensman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As a newly appointed mental health champion, I take a very deep interest in accommodation like this, where it is in very high demand. And whilst I recognise the lane, having used it many times myself, I'm wondering about vehicle movements being supported living and or permanent accommodation would be a lot lower than were it to be regular residential property. And therefore the balance for me is that I don't think this would actually increase that much on vehicle movements. I don't know if Andrew can help me on that. But at the same time, it's single story, so it doesn't stick up as high as it would necessarily having a hard edge to the village envelope, which I appreciate is in the countryside, so it probably would taper off. And if it's carefully landscaped, to me, I think it's probably an ideal, because trying to find developers and care providers who are prepared to come forward with schemes like this, and it's difficult to say where to put them, and they're obviously just expanding their existing facilities. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Andrew, you'll find on page 37 it states that there's additional 28 staff would be employed, although they wouldn't all be on site at the same time, but an additional 28 is, I'll come back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, I think that's right. It sets out additional 28 staff, but they would operate on a shift pattern. So I think the intention is that there would be up to 8 staff at any given time as a maximum for the new supported living units, whereas there's 10 on maximum at the existing care home. So at any one time there'd be a maximum of 18 staff on site, and it's probably going to be within the range of 14 to 18 split between the supported living units and the existing care home, but the majority of the workers would be at the care home rather than providing care to supported living units in terms of the split of staff on shift support each part of the site.
There would also be additional commercial traffic going to the site, obviously, because things would need to be delivered. So, you've got to add that on as well. I've now got Councillor Mann, and I'll come back to you, Councillor.
Another question, I'm afraid, Chair. I think we're all in a bit of a dilemma about this, but Councillor Abbott has quite sort of correctly pointed out the intensification of specialist housing within the ward. If there are 4 or 5 facilities and this one is expanding, I mean, I think I've never heard it suggested as a reason for refusal that there is, in essence, too much of this facility available in a village. I mean, has that ever been tested at Appeal, for example? Would it be a point that could be made in reason for refusal?
Or could it be that it's too much additional for the neighbour who is not a care home, the residents of Wayne?
I'm not aware of an appeal decision where that's been tested. We shouldn't say it hasn't been done. It's just that I couldn't say that I'm aware of it. I guess we would always start by assessing it against what our planning policies say. So is there a conflict? Yeah. So if we had a policy which said, we as an authority supported the provision of these types of facilities, but not with an over concentration or more than 2 within a ward, or if we had some sort of policy which clearly said how we would view that, then I think we would have stronger grounds to run that sort of argument. I think without a direct policy, it's more difficult to run that argument unless you can identify particular consequences of having that concentration, which conflict with our policies, which talk about sort of residential amenity, traffic movements, noise, lighting, those sorts of things. So I guess if we're saying that these institutional uses have more lighting or have more vehicle movements, and by having a concentration in that area collectively or cumulatively, that's unacceptable in terms of residential amenity. I think that's perhaps where I think I could see a conflict with policy, if that's what members think. But I don't think just saying we think there's too many within that area, because I can see the question at the appeal being, well, if this is too many, on what grounds do you make that judgment? What would be an acceptable number? Where's your policy to back that up? That sort of thing. So I think that's probably what members need to think about.
Thank you, that's helpful.
If that's helpful.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, sorry to over-egg the pudding, Madam Chairman, but it's a question actually. The officer said about not affecting the things I raised, not affecting the amenity space. I could see the new amenity space for the new residents in the new block. That's very clear. Could he, going back to the slide, show us what the current amenity space is for the existing residents and what it will be with the scheme, and also what the pedestrian route through the scheme will be given that new arrangement for the road?
Yeah, bear with me, I'll just share the screen for the presentation. Sorry, that's the wrong. So this shows the existing arrangement. This area here, as I'll go on showing the next slide, is the area where the soakaway would be provided. So you can sort of, when I swap between the two, you can see this existing line there is the existing fence. So as it comes down, I take the point actually in terms of the new access arrangement would remove a portion of this sort of area here within the site, but it wouldn't be to the drainage or soakaway. That would be in this area, and the individual units would each have their own private garden. So it wouldn't be any reduction as a result of the soakaway, but I take the point in terms of there would be a new boundary along here, and there would be some loss of existing amenity space to Rascase in this particular area. But it is a very large area of open space with quite a lot of adventure play equipment and so on. So I don't feel that the resulting amenity for existing care home residents would be adversely affected by that change. And in terms of the route through the site, that would likely be the sort of a shared route for vehicular traffic and for pedestrians to navigate down the sort of northern edge of the site.
So the traffic,
where's the road gone to?
So the traffic wouldn't use the new laid road?
Oh, so this, sorry, I should have shown this is a screen. So this is emergency access point, and that would be Grasscrete. So that wouldn't actually be used by, there wouldn't be a cut through for pedestrians at this point through. There would be a gate here for if there was a fire emergency, they could open the gate up and they'd have this Grasscrete track that could be used by a fire appliance. But this route along the northern edge of the site would be retained as the primary route for vehicles travelling to the supported living units, and also for staff and residents to access the front of the site and village.
Okay, thank you. Does any other member wish to raise anything else? Well, I have a motion on the table to refuse this application. I'm going to put that motion to the vote first. All those in favour of refusal? 2, 3. Those against? That motion has fallen. I shall now need a new motion, please. Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Yes, I would move that we grant this application.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. It has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. I'm going to put that to the vote now. All those in favour of granting the application? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Abstentions? That application has been granted. Thank you, members. That now brings us on to our final application this evening. This is application on 5C. Application number 20-01474 full units 1, 2 and 3, 6th Avenue, Bluebridge Industrial Estate, Halstead. The application can be found on pages 50 to 65, and the presentation is going to be made by Carol. Thank you, Carol, and good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This application is for erection of 13 commercial units for use class E, G and B8. So basically it's for offices and storage and distribution use. And the location is Unit 123 along 6th Avenue in Bridge Industrial Estate in Halstead. This is the location plan. The red boundary is the application site, and as you can see, there's some dotted line which refers to a previous approval, approved footprint for a similar proposal. However, the previous approval has been lapsed in July last year. This shows the aerial photo of the site and the wider area. As you can see, The site is located in the northern part of Brewbridge Industrial Estate. This is 3rd Avenue. This area is actually like an extension to Brewbridge Industrial Estate, and the nearest residential unit is along Fen Road, which is about 250 meters away. And this is the proposed site plan. The applicant is proposed to provide a total number of 13 commercial units. Due to the gradient change of the site, the applicant is proposed to divide the site into 2 courts. The western court will contain units 1 to units 10. Units 1 and units 2 will provide a small office, while units 4 and units 5 will provide both office and a small trade counter. In the eastern part, in the east court, there will be 3 units, and all 3 units will provide a trade counter ranging from 18 to 22 square meters. A total of 40 parking spaces will be provided, and that will also include 7 disabled parking. This shows the typical units planned and also showing units that with both the trade counter and a small office. Now we go into some of the elevations. This is a wheel for East Court. It shows the western elevation of Unit 12 and Unit 13, and this is the 6th Avenue. The southern part of East Court consists of Unit 11, which is like the L-shaped unit at the bottom here, and half of Unit 12. This elevation shows the northern elevation of East Court as well from 6th Avenue. Now we go into the West Court. This is the western elevation of the northern part of showing Unit 9 and Unit 10, and this is 6th Avenue. This is the western elevations of Unit 6 to Unit 8. This shows the street scene of along 6th Avenue. As you can see, this is the Eastern Court, and this is the 2 block of buildings in West Court. As compared to other existing buildings along 6th Avenue, the proposed building height is actually comparable and shorter than existing buildings along the same road. This is central piling to the immediate east of the site, and there's an existing anaerobic digestion plant to the further east of the site. This shows the section as well from 3rd Avenue towards the site. The upper plan shows the East Court as compared to those units along 5th Avenue. Members might wish to note that the site actually have quite a bit of gradient change, and the site gently sloped downwards from the east to the west and from north downhill towards the south. There are some site photos that officer has taken following preparation of the committee report. As the application has been submitted for some time, officers are of the view that there's a need to have some updated site photos. This photo shows the existing site entrance into the site along 6th Avenue. Last year, the site was largely empty and fenced off by fencing. However, as officer notes, there's some aggregates being delivered on site, and there's 2 site offices being erected on site. This photo also shows the existing building to the immediate east of the site that belongs to Central Piling and also their parking area. This photo shows the view along 6th Avenue towards the west. You can see it's like some of the residential units along Fenn Road now. And to the immediate west of 3rd Avenue and to the west of the site, there's an existing construction site that has approval for another 4 units for B1, B2 and B8 users. This photo shows the northwestern corner of the site and also the wheel along 3rd Avenue going a little bit downhill. And the photos on the right shows the construction site and the units currently being built to the west of the application site. This photo shows the southwestern corner of the site, and also there's a rear access to the units of along 5th Avenue. When officers consider the application, it's important to note that the previous approval under the previous application for 3 smaller commercial buildings for B1 and B8 use has been lapsed. The current proposal is proposing for 3 larger commercial buildings. Noting that this part of the industrial estate actually have commercial and industrial development being well established on the estate, officers of the view that the principle of development is actually in line with the adopted policy. The proposed scale, design and appearance are also considered compatible to other buildings within the industrial estate. Sufficient parking will be provided and space for vehicular maneuvering within the site will be provided. And there's no objection from Essex Highway following the revision to the site layout. There will be no detrimental impact on residential amenity, and appropriate landscaping strip has been proposed within the site layout plan, subject to approval condition for more detailed landscaping design. There's no objection from consultee, and there's no public representation received. Officers, when considering the planning balance, officers of the view that the proposal will deliver both economic and social benefit and will constitute sustainable development. And therefore, the recommendation is to grant the application subject to 106 agreement. There was a Section 106 agreement with the previous approval. However, because the previous approval has been lapsed and money has not been spent, and it is recommended to transfer the money from the previous Section 106 agreement and to include a top-up fee for the additional floor space created into a varied Section 106 agreement. And Essex Highways has also requested for a further Section 106 agreement contribution towards a 5-year monitoring plan, monitoring fee of a workplace travel plan. Just a member update. The applicant today has actually submitted a construction phase plan and traffic management plan in view of the proposed condition 3. The applicants want to demonstrate that they have no intention to abuse the mechanism. They are aware that they should not commence any development on site, and they want to clarify that is the current tenant without permission has been delivering some aggregates to store on site. So they are aware that it needs to be rectified, and they want to demonstrate that they're willing to cooperate with the council, and that's why they have submitted the construction traffic management plan ahead of the committee, and hoping that it can demonstrate that they are genuine to work with the council. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for a much more straightforward application than the last one, and fewer conflicting factors for us to attach weight to. This is within development boundary. It's within employment land designation. It's providing commercial units in an employment land designation area, and it's going to provide 48 full-time equivalent jobs. So happy, Madam Chairman, to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. For a second, did you wish to speak, Councillor Abbott? No, thank you. Sorry. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Swear?
I was also going to second,
yes,
Madam Chairman. But, Madam Chairman, if I may, I'd just like to concur with Councillor Mann's comments, and I think it's obviously within the development boundary and with the economic and social benefits, and I'm very pleased to see this come forward for Halstead because, as we know, we've had an awful lot of building in and around Halstead, and it's good to see potential extra employment coming to the town, which will add to the sustainability, and this will obviously have social benefits as well to Halstead and the surrounding areas. So I will support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know. I'll go for Councillor Johnson first. Sorry, Councillor Bowers. You both put your hands up at the same time. Councillor Johnson, then I'll go to Councillor Bowers. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Very kind of you. Do we actually know how much, if any, space is currently available or empty on that industrial estate? I know the estate very well. We talk about new units. I mean, what is perhaps in the way of vacant factories? That's one quick question. And is there any association between the previous approval, which is mentioned on page 55, and the current one?
Carol, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I haven't got any figures in hand in terms of the vacant weight within the industrial estate. In terms of the second question, as compared to the previous approval, the current proposal is nearly 3 times bigger in terms of floor space.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just wondered, any association between the applicants? Is this a completely separate unit to the one where it's elapsed or not?
It is still the same applicant, but they have different tenants in mind now, and that's why they come up with kind of like more bespoke, like individual units for the potential tenants as compared to what they have proposed in 2017 for another tenant.
So they've done their research and they know what they need to build. Councillor Bowers, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I also support this application and concur with the comments made by Councillor Mann and Councillor Schweer, and especially the forecasted 48 FTEs is fantastic news for Halstead and the surrounding areas, so definitely support the application. I've just got one question in regards to section 106. Carol the officer mentioned about money being transferred, open space money from the previous approval and a top-up fee. Can we have some sort of information about how much the financial figure that actually would mean?
Yes, I wonder what the top-up fee was. Do you know what it is, Carol?
Sorry, I haven't got the exact figure, but the total figure now is 16,800 about. So the previous contribution will be about like 1/3 of it.
Oh. So this is the final. In the report, that is with it,
Yes.
it topped up.
Yeah, that's the total amount they need to contribute for open space is 16,000.
I just read it that with 16,000 and it was going to be topped up. So no, it's already topped up. Thank you for that clarification. Neil.
Yeah, just to explain, so the open spaces SPD contains a calculation for employment. It's a relatively low figure because it reflects that there's a relatively low demand generated by employment. So if you're a resident in a town, that's more likely where you're going to do all of your sport and all of your playing with children, that sort of thing. if you're working in a town, then we think you may access sort of amenity areas at sort of lunchtime or perhaps after work, and perhaps you might use sports facilities, but you won't be using allotments and play equipment. So the figures are relatively low relative to the figures that you'd usually have on a residential development. So that's how those figures have been arrived at.
Thank you, Neil. Does anyone else wish to add anything further? Well, it has been moved by Councillor Mann and seconded by Councillor Abbott that we approve this application. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour of approving this application? Thank you, members. That is unanimous. And thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our applications this evening. Thank you for your attendance, and I thank all the officers for their presentations. And thank you, Neil, for being here. Thank you. Good night, everyone.